"You think you've won, David?" Ada whispered, her family cheering as she signed the divorce papers with a smile that cut like glass. She had no idea that the man she humiliated had already plotted the most meticulous revenge, turning every lie, every betrayal, and every accomplice against her in a way that would leave the entire room speechless. Viewers, have you ever trusted someone so completely that their betrayal felt like a physical blow? What would you do if the tables turned, and everyone you knew was forced to watch? Subscribe, like, comment and watch till ending to share this interesting to family and friends. My name is David Okoye. I'm 32, a civil engineer living in Lagos, Nigeria, and I thought I had everything I ever wanted. A successful career, a beautiful wife, Ada, and a life that, on paper, seemed perfect. But the truth is, life rarely stays on paper. Life is messy, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel. I learned that the hard way on the very night the city welcomed a new year, a night that was supposed to be filled with champagne, fireworks, and laughter. Instead, it became the night my world shattered, publicly, humiliatingly, in front of the people I once thought loved me. Ada, my wife, standing there in her shimmering dress, announced she was divorcing me, and her family cheered. I arrived at the banquet hall early, just as the first string quartet started playing, soft violins echoing through the high-ceilinged hall. The chandeliers glimmered like constellations, and the tables were a mix of white linen and gold accents. Outside, fireworks crackled, promising celebration and joy, but inside, my stomach twisted with a strange unease I couldn't place. Ada looked radiant as always, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a hesitation I couldn't read. I chalked it up to pre-party nerves. I should have known better. We walked in together, and I felt a strange silence in her touch, a small tremor when she brushed my arm. We were welcomed with polite applause, glasses clinking, people smiling, but there was a subtle tension in the air. Something felt off. I noticed her whispering into her sister's ear, and her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I convinced myself I was imagining it. I wanted to. Then, as the countdown began, Ada stepped forward, her voice ringing across the hall, confident and cruel. "I want a divorce," she said, and the room erupted. Not in shock, not in concern, but in cheers. Her family, the people I had welcomed into my life, celebrated my humiliation. Laughter, clinking glasses, whispered congratulations. My hand trembled around my champagne flute, and I realized I was holding on to nothing but air. It was in that moment, frozen in the strobe of camera flashes, that everything fell into focus. The way Ada's brother smirked when our eyes met. The small nod she gave him, subtle but deliberate. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They had been waiting for this night, planning it, celebrating it, long before I even suspected. I thought I knew the people closest to me. I was wrong. As I stepped back, trying to mask the storm rising inside me, my mind flashed back to the past 6 months. Late nights when Ada's phone was always locked, whispered calls behind closed doors, her excuses and my blind trust. I remembered the day I found the first subtle sign, a lipstick-stained napkin in her bag, quickly brushed off as a mistake. And there were more signs. Texts deleted too quickly. Missed dinners. Nervous laughter at the wrong moments. I had seen it all and I had chosen to ignore it. Because I loved her. Because I wanted to believe in us. But now, standing there in the spotlight of betrayal, I understood the depth of the deception. Ada wasn't just unfaithful. This was public, deliberate, and orchestrated with precision. And I realized then that this was bigger than us. It was her family, her lover, a network of manipulation that had ensnared my life. I lowered my glass slowly, letting the champagne spill over my hand, and I didn't flinch as the warmth ran down my wrist. Silence settled in a strange way, the room realizing that I wasn't reacting the way they expected. Calm, almost serene. But inside, a storm brewed. I didn't know the plan yet, but I knew this. Revenge would not be loud, it would not be obvious, and it would not be rushed. It would be precise, meticulous, and unforgettable. And in that moment, the first ember of resolve ignited inside me. After the party, I walked through the rain-slicked streets of Lagos, the neon reflections rippling beneath my shoes like fractured memories. The city's celebrations continued around me, fireworks exploding over the skyline, but I felt detached, hollow. I replayed Ada's words again and again, her voice cutting through me like glass. I want a divorce. How could someone I shared years of laughter, dreams, and promises with betray me so publicly? And why had her family cheered? The answer lay somewhere in the shadows of the past 6 months. I remembered the nights she worked late, claiming urgent projects, while I, exhausted from long days at the construction sites, waited for her calls that never came. Her phone, always mysteriously locked, was something I noticed but didn't pry into. I had trusted her naively. My patience, something ingrained in me since childhood, had always been my strength, but now it felt like a weakness. It was that evening 6 months ago when I first noticed the pattern. Ada had left her bag carelessly on the couch, and a folded piece of paper slipped out. On it, a note scrawled in a handwriting that looked familiar yet not hers: "Can't wait to see you tonight." My first instinct was denial. It couldn't be hers. And yet, she laughed nervously when I asked about it, a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "All that? Just a silly message from a friend," she had said. I swallowed my doubt, convincing myself I was imagining things. The truth, I would later realize, was unavoidable. Ada had met Chaik, a charismatic colleague at her firm, someone who thrived on manipulation and control. He promised excitement, attention, and validation, things she craved but had never admitted to me. Chaik's influence had grown over time, subtly isolating her from me while entwining her in a web of secrecy. Ada had wanted to feel wanted, alive, and unshackled, even if it meant betraying everything we had built. I remember the first subtle act of betrayal, a misplaced lipstick-stained napkin tucked into the corner of her bag. At the time, I laughed it off as a mistake or accident. Then there were the whispered phone calls, the sudden tension in her voice when I asked simple questions, the way her laughter sometimes sounded rehearsed. My instincts told me something was wrong, but my heart refused to acknowledge the truth. I wanted to see her as I had always known her, the woman who laughed at my bad jokes, who loved my cooking, who kissed me before leaving for work. But now, standing in the cold rain, I realized denial had blinded me to patterns that were impossible to ignore. Her betrayal had been layered, carefully hidden, and her family's complicity revealed the deeper plan. Every smile I had shared with them, every toast raised in their honor, was now tainted with a sense of conspiracy. I couldn't believe I had been so blind. Yet even as my chest tightened with anger, another feeling crept in: clarity. I understood that reacting impulsively would only ruin me. This was not a moment for tears or shouting. If I wanted to reclaim control, to expose the truth, I would need patience, strategy, and evidence. I would need to play the long game. And in that moment, under the neon glow and falling rain, I swore to myself that every deceit, every secret, every betrayal would be revealed. And when it was, the world that had humiliated me tonight would finally see me, not as a victim but as someone who had always been 3 steps ahead. The morning after the New Year's Eve disaster, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in the dim light of our apartment, staring at the ceiling as Lagos roared outside, cars honking, fireworks still echoing faintly, the city celebrating life while mine felt like it had ended. Ada's words and the sight of her family cheering her announcement haunted me. I couldn't understand it, couldn't reconcile it. How could people who had laughed with me, eaten with me, celebrated milestones with me, now revel in my humiliation? The answer came in fragments, memories colliding like broken glass. Ada's family had always been competitive, subtly judgmental. Her father, a stern man with an unyielding sense of pride, had never hidden his disapproval of me. "He's ambitious, yes," her father once said at a family dinner, "but ambition doesn't make a man respectable." Her brother, sharp-tongued and smug, had always made little jabs about my job, my income, my friends. At the time, I had laughed them off, ignoring the sting, believing family was supposed to test you. Now, I realized those little jabs had been laying the foundation for this moment. As I replayed the party, every interaction came back in vivid detail. Ada's sister whispering into her ear before the announcement, the subtle nod, the glint of satisfaction in their eyes. Their celebration had been orchestrated for weeks, months even, a plan I had been blind to. They had been grooming her, influencing her, feeding her the idea that leaving me, publicly, would be the ultimate thrill and statement of freedom. And she had taken it like a marionette dancing to their strings. Then came a flashback I couldn't shake. A dinner 6 months ago where Ada's family had subtly compared me to other men, successful friends, wealthy cousins, the men she could have married. Ada had laughed nervously, unsure whether to defend me or appease them. I had thought nothing of it. Now I knew it had been a form of conditioning, planting doubt, shaping her decisions without her even realizing it. I also remembered Ada's private frustration she had whispered in moments of intimacy, her fear that she was trapped, her restlessness, her longing for excitement she claimed I couldn't provide. And yet, those whispers had always carried love, always carried intimacy. I had taken them as temporary complaints, never imagining they would become full-blown betrayal. The more I thought about it, the more I saw the web: Ada's lover, Chaik, subtly influencing her at work, her family strategically nurturing her dissatisfaction, even mutual friends unknowingly or knowingly fueling her ego. It wasn't just infidelity, it was manipulation on every level. I realized then that revenge would not only be about exposing Ada and Chaik, it would have to include her family. They had celebrated her cruelty, they had made it possible. And if I wanted justice, every layer of complicity had to be addressed. But that meant patience, precision, timing. A single misstep, and the truth would be dismissed as petty retaliation. The cinematic image of that realization stayed with me. A slow pan across our apartment, the rain-soaked city outside, my reflection in the window juxtaposed with the fading fireworks. Calm on the surface, storm underneath. I would wait. I would watch. And when the time was right, every secret, every betrayal would come to light, and no one would be able to deny it. I couldn't stop thinking about proof. Evidence. Something tangible that could confirm the suspicions I had buried deep inside for months. That night, after everyone had gone to their own lives and I was left alone in the quiet apartment, I found myself standing outside Ada's bedroom door. The dim light from the hallway cast long shadows across the carpet. My heart thumped, not from fear but from anticipation. This was the moment I needed to see the truth. I remembered the first time I had glimpsed cracks in our life. 6 months prior, I had accidentally left my laptop open while she stepped out, and a browser tab flickered, a social media page I didn't recognize. Curiosity had been my downfall, yet I didn't pursue it, choosing trust over suspicion. Later, the lipstick-stained napkin. Then whispers of late-night calls. Each moment had been a breadcrumb, each subtle act of secrecy a clue I refused to follow. Now, I approached her laptop, hesitating only for a second before sliding it open. The screen glowed like a spotlight on the betrayal I had long suspected. Hidden folders, encrypted files, messages, photos, and videos, all confirming what my gut had known. Ada had been with Chaik for months. The images were intimate, undeniable, and painfully precise. My stomach churned, but I didn't close it. I needed to see everything. I flashed back to a quiet evening in our living room months ago, Ada nervously laughing as she claimed she had extra work at the firm. I remembered catching her glancing at her phone, typing quickly, smiling in a way that made no sense. I had assumed it was harmless, a joke, a friend. But now I knew it wasn't harmless. It was calculated, a deliberate effort to hide a second life from me. And it wasn't just Chaik. Messages between Ada and her sister hinted at complicity, discussions of manipulation and timing. Even her mother had subtly encouraged her, sending words that seemed supportive but were laced with quiet insistence. You deserve more than him. Every layer of my world, the woman I loved, the family I trusted, had conspired to humiliate me. I leaned back in the chair, letting the weight of it sink in. The cinematic image of that moment stays with me, the blue glow of the screen reflecting off my face, shadows from the room elongating like the darkness of betrayal itself, my hands gripping the edges of the laptop, trembling only slightly. For the first time, fear mixed with clarity. This was bigger than Ada. This was her world conspiring to erase me. I paused, thinking of all the nights I had lain awake, wondering why things felt off, why she seemed distant, why the intimacy we once had frayed into polite conversations and quick kisses. I now knew it wasn't me, it was them. And that knowledge changed everything. The foreshadowing hit me hard. If I wanted revenge, it couldn't just be public humiliation. It needed strategy. It needed to be visible, undeniable, in a way that would shock everyone who had celebrated my downfall. I had the leverage, the truth, and now, finally, the resolve. And as I sat there in the quiet room watching the evidence unfold on the screen, I realized Ada had made a mistake, one that would cost her more than she could imagine. The morning light crept through the blinds, painting stripes of gold and shadow across the apartment. I sat at the small kitchen table, coffee untouched, laptop still open, the evidence of Ada's betrayal glaring at me. Rain had washed the streets clean overnight, but inside, my mind was a storm. I realized something crucial. This wasn't about anger alone. Anger was fleeting. Revenge, true, precise revenge, required patience, strategy, and control. I remembered my father, a man whose discipline had shaped me. He used to say, reacting in haste is the easiest way to lose. I had always admired that patience, but I had rarely needed it as much as now. Everything I had trusted, everyone I had loved, had been quietly conspiring against me. Ada, Chaik, her family, all pieces of a carefully constructed deception. And yet, they had underestimated one thing, my resolve. The cinematic memory of Ada's smirks at the party flashed in my mind. The way she held herself, poised yet smug, believing she had outsmarted me. And her family, the subtle nods, the whispered encouragements. I had replayed it in my head endlessly, each second sharpening my determination. I wouldn't shout, I wouldn't make a scene that only looked like anger. My revenge would be cold, calculated, public, and unforgettable. I reflected on my past as well. Before Ada, I had been cautious, even meticulous in personal relationships. I had learned to read people, to notice the subtleties, a twitch of the lip, a hesitation in speech, the smallest sign that all was not as it seemed. With Ada, I had ignored those instincts. Love had made me blind. But now, armed with evidence, those instincts were back in full force. The strategy began forming in my mind. I needed leverage, undeniable proof. I needed witnesses, circumstances, timing. Ada and Chaik's arrogance meant they believed themselves untouchable. That overconfidence was my advantage. I would make sure every step I took would maximize humiliation for them without compromising my dignity. Flashbacks hit me again. Ada laughing over dinner months ago, casually discussing her career ambitions while brushing off subtle hints that I noticed Chaik had been calling her late at night. I had wanted to trust her, to see the best in her, but now every memory was stained with deception. Each subtle slip, every lie, every secret message, all were pieces I could now wield like weapons. The cinematic imagery of that moment is vivid. Golden morning light reflecting off the kitchen table, laptop open with photos and messages glaring like accusations, coffee steam rising into the air, and my hands folded in front of me, calm but determined. Outside, Lagos was waking up, unaware of the storm brewing in one of its apartments. I realized something else. Ada had underestimated me because she didn't know me fully. She didn't know the patience drilled into me, the analytical mind honed by years of engineering, the ability to wait, plan, and execute flawlessly. And she certainly didn't know how satisfying it would be to watch her carefully constructed world crumble under the weight of her own betrayal. I took a deep breath, letting the storm inside me settle into cold resolve. The chessboard was set, the pieces moving in secret, invisible to everyone but me. And in that quiet morning, with shadows stretching across the floor and the faint hum of the city in the background, I swore to myself, when the time came, everyone who had cheered my humiliation would understand exactly what it meant to cross me. I knew Chaik would be my first move. He was arrogant, careless, and utterly convinced that his affair would remain secret. That overconfidence was the opening I needed. I spent days crafting an approach that was invisible, subtle, yet completely undeniable. I created a false identity online, posing as a potential business partner looking for a discreet deal. Chaik, ever eager to impress and manipulate, didn't hesitate to respond. The first conversation was a test, probing, harmless, casual. He bragged as I expected about his influence over Ada, his winning charm. Every word he typed was a thread I could pull, a confession waiting to be drawn out. I recorded everything discreetly, hidden behind layers of encryption, ensuring that the proof would be airtight. The thrill was chilling, the power intoxicating. For months I had been powerless, betrayed, humiliated, but now I was in control. Flashbacks came unbidden. I remembered seeing them together months ago, laughing a little too intimately during a casual office party. Ada had brushed it off when I asked, claiming Chaik was just friendly. I had believed her because I wanted to. And now, seeing the truth laid bare in recorded conversations, I felt the mix of vindication and sorrow. This wasn't just infidelity, it was manipulation, premeditated and cruel. Cinematic imagery dominated that week. Me pacing in my apartment, city lights reflecting off the windows, the laptop screen casting a cold blue glow on my face. Rain streaked the glass as if the heavens themselves were marking the gravity of what I was about to do. I felt the tension coil in my chest, a mix of fear, anticipation, and determination. By the end of the week I had what I needed. Chaik, in his arrogance, had confessed in detail to his manipulation, to his exploitation of Ada's insecurities, and to his plans to win over her family. I had it all recorded, backed up, ready to unleash at the perfect moment. I didn't gloat, I didn't act impulsively. I waited because timing, as always, would determine the impact. I also realized the larger picture. Revenge wasn't just about Chaik. Ada's family had been complicit, cheering her cruelty, enabling her lies. They would all be part of the reckoning. My plan had grown beyond personal betrayal into a full reckoning, a careful public unveiling that would leave no part of the conspiracy untouched. And so the stage was set. The pieces were moving, silently, invisibly. Chaik believed himself untouchable. Ada thought she had won her freedom. Her family thought their celebration had secured their triumph. But I was ready. Every subtle move I had observed, every small betrayal I had endured, was about to be turned into a weapon. And when the moment came, everyone in that hall, the orchestrators, the enablers, the betrayers, would be forced to face the consequences of their arrogance. When the time came for the confrontation, I chose the battleground with the same precision I used in my engineering projects. Public enough to be witnessed, controlled enough that I dictated the pace. I arranged a reunion dinner under the pretense of reconciliation, an olive branch disguised as civility. Ada, Chaik, and her family arrived, thinking they would see a humbled man, someone desperate for closure. They were wrong. The banquet hall was smaller than the New Year's venue, intimate, with warm, low lighting casting long shadows, soft music that didn't mask the tension, and a projection screen already waiting silently in the corner. I arrived calm, face composed, hands steady, though my knuckles ached from gripping the invitation. Ada floated in, every gesture rehearsed, eyes darting to gauge reactions. Chaik walked in like a man who believed he had already won, arrogance folded into his every step. Her family clustered like vultures celebrating the anticipated downfall of a prey. I sat at the head of the table, letting the small talk float across the room, letting the polite chatter lull them into a false sense of security. Then I let silence take over, heavy and commanding. I raised my glass, not in celebration but in a toast to truth. Faces softened into polite smiles. Then, with a subtle press of a remote hidden in my palm, the projection screen flickered to life. It began innocuously, casual messages, coffee meetups, harmless laughter. But it quickly escalated. Photos appeared, time-stamped messages, screenshots of conversations meticulously collected over months. The room's air shifted, the hum of polite conversation died. Ada's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Chaik's jaw tightened, he could feel the walls closing. Her mother shifted uneasily, her father's pride faltered. Every secret they had assumed safe was laid bare with clinical precision. Chaik tried to laugh it off. "You set this up," he said, his voice brittle, trembling beneath the weight of exposure. I countered with the recording, his own voice, admitting in vivid detail how he manipulated Ada, how he convinced her family that leaving me would be a liberation. The smug confidence he wore for months dissolved, replaced by panic. Ada's brother rose, face red with fury, but the projection revealed his complicity, his messages orchestrating the timing, the applause, the entire spectacle. Even her family's celebration was exposed, their orchestrated betrayal now a weapon against them. The cinematic moment unfolded in slow motion. The camera would have panned across faces, pride cracking into shame, laughter curdling into silence, shock etched into every feature. Ada lunged at me once, anger and regret colliding, but the staff held her back. Her sister wept quietly, the mask of theatrical support shattered. I remained still, calm, letting each revelation land like measured strikes, deliberate, inevitable. Every secret, every betrayal revealed in perfect sequence. And as the room absorbed the weight of truth, I felt the subtle thrill of vindication. Silence reigned, thick and undeniable, broken only by the occasional stifled gasp or whispered denial. The lesson was clear. Those who had celebrated my humiliation were now forced to confront their own. And yet, in the shadows of my triumph, a single text landed in my inbox. "You may have won tonight, but remember, some fires are not yours to light." Even in victory, a shiver ran down my spine, a reminder that the game was far from over. After the projection, the air fractured. The room was heavy with accusations, denials, and the sharp scent of humiliation. Chaik's face burned crimson as he scrambled to justify himself, his words fumbling against the weight of his own recordings. Ada's sobs broke the silence, half shame, half desperation, as the truth she had hidden so carefully became a spectacle before the people she thought would protect her. Her family, once triumphant, splintered into factions, some horrified, some furious, some frantically trying to salvage their pride. I remained calm, seated at the head of the table, the glow of the projector casting light across my face, shadows highlighting the sharp satisfaction in my eyes. I let them unravel slowly. Every gasp, every whispered apology, every defensive stance was amplified by the evidence I laid out. This was my revenge, not impulsive, not cruel for the sake of cruelty, but precise, calculated, and inescapable. Flashbacks played in my mind sharper than ever. I saw Ada laughing quietly with Chaik at a restaurant months ago, her hand brushing against his in ways that felt intimate even in the crowded room. I remembered the nights she whispered about feeling trapped, her restlessness, her longing for excitement. Each memory had once seemed like trivial dissatisfaction. Now, under the cinematic lens of truth, It became a pattern, a chain of betrayal stretching back months. Chaik tried to argue, voice rising, but the evidence was relentless. His recorded words detailed how he exploited Ada's insecurities, how he manipulated her family, how he deliberately orchestrated my public humiliation. He sputtered, rage and panic contorting his features. Ada's brother, cornered by the messages revealing his role in timing the divorce announcement and cheering my public embarrassment, paled. Her mother sat frozen, unable to defend herself against her own subtle manipulations laid bare for all to see. The cinematic tension was almost unbearable. Close-ups would capture Chaik's trembling hands, Ada's wide, tear-streaked eyes, the subtle twitch of her brother's jaw, her mother's silent shame. Wide shots captured the entire room, the fractured alliances, the disbelieving faces of everyone who thought they had orchestrated my downfall. I watched it all unfold like a director observing a meticulously planned scene, the power of restraint, timing, and precision in full effect. And yet, even as I reveled in the exposure, a sliver of unease lingered. That anonymous message from earlier, "Some fires are not yours to light," clung to me. Was this simply a threat, or a hint that someone else was still moving in the shadows? The thought chilled me, but it did not deter me. I had done what was necessary, and for now, control rested firmly in my hands. By the end of the evening, the room had been transformed. Pride had been stripped away, alliances shattered, and secrets that were meant to humiliate me had instead humiliated them. I stood, quietly, feeling the calm after a storm, aware that this was only a step. The fallout was inevitable, and the echoes of their reactions would last far longer than any shout or scream I could have produced. By the time I left the banquet hall, the city had settled into the quiet of early morning. Lagos streets glistened under the soft glow of streetlights, reflections dancing on the wet asphalt from the previous night's rain. Fireworks had long faded, replaced by the hum of distant traffic and the occasional honk of a car. The chaos I had left behind, the shattered pride, broken alliances, and exposed lies, was still alive in that room, and I could almost hear it echoing behind me. I walked alone, each step deliberate, feeling the weight of what had just transpired. Revenge had a strange clarity, a cold satisfaction, but also an unexpected emptiness. Ada's betrayal had been cruel, public, and meticulously planned, but seeing it unravel before her own eyes did not bring joy as I had imagined. Instead, it brought reflection. I realized how deeply betrayal cuts, how subtly trust can be eroded, and how resilient one must be to reclaim control. Flashbacks carried me to the months before, her smiles when she told me she loved me, her whispered confessions of feeling trapped, and the subtle ways she had distanced herself while pretending to be intimate. I had replayed those moments endlessly, feeling the sting of hindsight, the recognition of what I had ignored. And yet, they were now pieces of a story I could finally understand. Every slight, every whispered lie, every carefully hidden message had been part of a pattern. And now that pattern had been exposed. Cinematic imagery framed my reflection. Neon signs reflected in puddles, a lone taxi passing by, the rain still lingering on leaves, and my own shadow stretching long across the sidewalk. It was a quiet contrast to the chaos I had left behind, the calm after the storm. I realized that life does not always reward vengeance with peace. Sometimes it offers only clarity, understanding, and the faint hum of empowerment that comes from taking back what was yours. A message on my phone caught my eye, a single cryptic text from an unknown number: "This isn't over." It was a reminder that the world is rarely as simple as right and wrong, truth and lies. Someone, somewhere, still held secrets, still held motives that could ripple into my life. But for now, the immediate threat had been neutralized. Chaik was exposed, Ada humiliated, her family fractured. The intricate web of deceit had unraveled before me, and I could finally breathe. I thought of the future. Quiet mornings without anxiety, plans without fear, a life reclaimed from the hands of betrayal. Yet the shadows of the past lingered, reminders that trust must be guarded, patience must be exercised, and vigilance is necessary even when victory feels absolute. The cinematic image of the city at dawn mirrored my own state, reborn, reflective, and cautiously optimistic. As I entered my apartment, I paused at the door, glancing at the familiar spaces that had once felt like comfort but had been the setting of my betrayal. I realized that recovery is not instantaneous, that scars remain visible even after justice is served. I allowed myself a long breath, letting the tension drain, knowing that tomorrow would be different, and I was ready for it. The morning sunlight poured through my apartment window, soft and golden, brushing against the furniture like a promise of a new beginning. Lagos was awake, humming with life, oblivious to the storm I had left behind. I sat at the edge of my bed, coffee steaming quietly on the nightstand, my hands folded around the cup. The events of the past weeks, months really, flashed in my mind like a montage of betrayal and revelation. Chike exposed, Ada humiliated, her family fractured. The public confrontation had ended, but the echoes of it lingered in my mind and in the city. I thought about Ada. I felt no anger now, only clarity. Betrayal had stripped away the illusions, revealing truths that had been hidden under layers of love and trust. I remembered her subtle manipulations, the whispered frustrations she had shared in moments of intimacy, the way she had let herself be influenced by her family and Chike. And yet, despite all that, a small part of me felt sorrow, for the love that could have been, for the life we had built together that now lay in ruins. I glanced at the unopened envelope on my table, labeled simply, "From Ada." I didn't open it. Not yet. It sat there, a quiet reminder that even in victory life is never truly complete. There are threads that remain, stories untold, and perhaps a reckoning yet to come. A subtle thrill ran through me, not of revenge but of possibility. The next chapter, whatever it might hold, would be mine to shape. Cinematic imagery captured the moment perfectly, the golden sunlight highlighting the dust motes drifting lazily in the room, the coffee steam curling like wisps of memory, my shadow stretching long across the floor as the city skyline glimmered in the distance. It was calm, peaceful even, but beneath that serenity lingered the faint hum of tension, the knowledge that life rarely offers closure in a neat package. I reflected on the lessons the ordeal had taught me. Trust is precious but fragile. Patience is powerful, sharper than rage. Strategy outweighs impulse. And above all, reclaiming control of your life, even after devastation, is a triumph no one can take away. I had learned to see beyond appearances, to anticipate motives, to navigate the subtle manipulations that had once ensnared me. As I poured the last of the coffee into my cup, I allowed myself a smile, quiet, private, self-assured. I had survived betrayal. I had turned humiliation into empowerment. And as I glanced one last time at the envelope, I knew that the story was not fully over. There were still fires burning in the shadows, secrets waiting to surface, and perhaps challenges yet to arrive. I stood, taking a deep breath, and opened the window. The city stretched before me, endless and alive, full of opportunity, full of uncertainty. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Even in the wake of betrayal, even in the aftermath of calculated revenge, life continues. We endure. We adapt. We rise. And sometimes, the most powerful victories are the ones that are quiet, measured, and deeply personal. Subscribe, like, comment, and share for interesting story to family and friends.